There are stories that live in the dust of time, waiting to be uncovered by hands that still believe in truth. For centuries, the world has spoken of Africa in fragments, divided by borders, languages, and the memories of conquest. Yet beneath those divisions, there runs a deeper current, a thread of connection so powerful that even time cannot cut it. The discovery of shared DNA between the people of Ethiopia and the Igbo of Nigeria is not just a scientific revelation, it is a reminder that history has not yet finished speaking. It is proof that what binds humanity is stronger than what divides it, that the bloodline of greatness can flow unseen beneath centuries of silence. For generations, scholars built their theories on what they could see: artifacts, inscriptions, trade routes, and ruins. They charted the rise and fall of kingdoms, wrote books, drew maps, and decided where civilization began and where it ended. Yet DNA, silent and invisible, waited patiently. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not take sides, it only reveals. And when the strands of life began to tell their story, they exposed something that humbled every mind that thought it had already understood Africa. The genetic connection between the Igbo and the Ethiopians was not an accident of migration. It was the echo of an ancient unity, a testimony that the continent once moved as one great rhythm before it was divided by lines and foreign hands. The Igbo of West Africa, known for their creativity, resilience, and democratic traditions, have long been a people of mystery, philosophers, traders, and craftsmen, whose art from Igbo Ukwu still dazzles the world with precision beyond its time. Meanwhile, in the highlands of Ethiopia, the ancient kingdom of Aksum thrived, building monuments that defied logic, creating alphabets, and commanding trade routes that connected Africa with Arabia and Asia. Two lands separated by miles and mountains, yet connected by spirit, language, tones, and now through science by blood. The discovery of shared genetic patterns between these peoples did not just surprise scientists. It rewrote the narrative of Africa's migrations and civilization. It showed that the continent's greatness did not exist in isolated pockets but flowed like rivers, meeting, merging, and shaping one another. This DNA revelation shamed the arrogance of scholars who once claimed that Africa's civilizations were isolated, that its people never traveled far or influenced one another. It silenced those who insisted that greatness came from outside, that innovation arrived from foreign shores. The genes themselves tell a different story. They reveal that the Igbo and Ethiopians share ancient ancestors who once walked the same paths, traded the same goods, and perhaps spoke languages that shared rhythm and breath. These were people who understood the meaning of continuity, how memory travels through generations, how the story of one people is never complete without the other. It is astonishing to think that thousands of years before modern nations existed, there were Africans who already built networks of movement and identity that connected the east and west of the continent. Caravans, ships, and oral traditions carried their legacy, but DNA carried their In every cell of an Igbo child or an Ethiopian elder lies a fragment of that ancient unity. Science, for all its modern precision, has only now caught up to what history once knew but forgot that Africa was always whole. The scholars who once measured history by conquest failed to see that true greatness is not built on domination but on connection. The genetic link between these two peoples is a story of shared survival, creativity, and continuity. It is not a tale of war or empire. It is the quiet endurance of a bond that outlasted kingdoms. It teaches us that the memory of our ancestors is not only written in books or carved in stone, it is carried in the very structure of our being. To the young listener hearing this, understand what this discovery means. It means you come from a lineage that transcends geography. You are not limited by maps or the shallow definitions of nationhood. You are the descendant of travelers, thinkers, builders, and dreamers who saw beyond their horizons. Your ancestors crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and sailed rivers not just for survival but for understanding. They believed that the world was a shared home, and in their unity they built legacies that still shape us today. When DNA speaks, it tells us what history forgot: that Africa was never backward, never lost, never fragmented. The connection between Ethiopia and Igbo land is a reflection of how the continent once moved as one, with rivers of trade and trails of ideas linking the heart of the Sahara to the coasts of the Atlantic and the valleys of the Nile. From the spiritual traditions of Nsaka to the ancient chants of Aksum, there are echoes, shared patterns of thought, symbols, and language that suggest a memory far older than modern history. This discovery does more than rewrite the past. It demands a new way of seeing the future. For too long, the world has been taught to look at Africa as a place divided by tribes and tongues, but now, science itself confirms what the old storytellers always knew: that all rivers flow to one source, that all people share one beginning. The Igbo proverb says, "A man who does not know where the rain began to beat him cannot say where he dried his body." The DNA that connects these two great peoples shows us where the rain began, where the story of unity started before it was scattered by time. This connection also calls us to humility. For every scholar who once dismissed Africa's complexity, for every textbook that reduced its greatness to footnotes, this revelation stands as a quiet rebuke. It reminds us that knowledge is never complete until we listen to all voices, until we allow every piece of the puzzle to speak. The scientists did not invent this connection, they only revealed what was already there waiting to be acknowledged. The ancestors knew. The songs, symbols, and traditions carried hints of it across millennia. The Igbo symbols of Nisabati, the Aksumite crosses of Ethiopia, both bearing patterns of geometry and meaning that hint at a shared intellectual origin. These were not coincident. They were the fingerprints of a civilization that saw knowledge as sacred and connection as eternal. The DNA that shamed the scholars is not a story of embarrassment, but enlightenment. It is an invitation to rethink how we see one another, not as strangers divided by distance, but as kin separated by time. It shows that even when history is rewritten, truth has a way of returning, sometimes through the most unexpected paths, and in that truth there is healing. This revelation also challenges young Africans to reclaim the pride of their origin. You are not a fragment of history, you are the continuation of it. The same blood that flowed through the builders of Aksum flows through the innovators of Igbo. The same intelligence that carved the obelisks of Ethiopia inspired the metalworks of Nigeria. The same courage that kept kingdoms alive in the face of invasion beats in your chest today. The bridge between these two peoples is not just genetic, it is symbolic of the bridge we must rebuild across Africa, between nations, between hearts, between the past and the future. Let this discovery awaken something deeper within you. Let it remind you that every African, regardless of origin, is part of one great family that once stood as the pillar of human progress. Before there were borders, before foreign names marked the map, there was unity, a harmony of movement and purpose that connected the Nile to the Niger, the Horn to the Atlantic. That unity is calling us again. If DNA can carry memory, then it can also carry responsibility, the responsibility to honor what we share. It reminds us that the greatest empires were not those built by domination, but by cooperation. The story of Ethiopia and the Igbo is the story of resilience, of migration without loss, of separation without forgetting. It teaches us that to move forward we must look inward, to the truths buried in our blood, our language, and our history. The DNA that shamed the scholars was never meant to humiliate anyone. It was meant to awaken everyone. It was meant to show that the answers we seek about identity, heritage, and greatness are not hidden in distant lands or foreign scripts, but within ourselves. The body remembers what the mind has forgotten. Science has now spoken what the ancestors whispered. We were one, and we can be one again. The challenge before us is not to merely celebrate this discovery, but to live, to rebuild the bridges of understanding, to value our shared heritage, and to pass on the truth that connection, not conquest, is the foundation of civilization. The blood that runs through our veins carries more than oxygen. It carries stories, courage, and light. It is time to honor that light. It is time to walk again as one people, from the Horn to the Niger, from memory into destiny. The DNA that links Ethiopia and the Igbo is far more than a mere scientific revelation. It is a mirror that reflects the forgotten face of humanity's shared beginning. It stands as a quiet but powerful reminder that time and distance are not barriers to truth, only temporary veils that conceal the continuity of our story. When science uncovered the strands of connection between the two peoples, it did not just alter data or rewrite academic chapters. It awakened something ancient that had been asleep in the heart of our collective memory. It revealed that what we once thought of as separate destinies were in fact two notes in the same eternal song, two branches of a tree that has always had one root deep in the soil of Africa's beginning. This revelation reaches beyond laboratories and genetic charts. It enters the realm of identity, belonging, and pride. For centuries, the world divided Africans by language, geography, and appearance, teaching that each group rose and fell in isolation. Yet the DNA has now spoken with quiet certainty, telling us that no ocean of time or distance can erase the bond that once existed and still exists between peoples who have walked different paths but share the same ancestral rhythm. It is a scientific truth with emotional gravity, a rediscovery of kinship that defies the walls of colonial maps and the limits of historical imagination. When we think about the Ethiopians, we see a people whose roots reach deep into the ancient soil of Axum, where scholars and traders connected continents long before modern nations were born. Their monuments, carved from solid rock, still stand as witnesses to human genius. And when we look toward the Igbo, we see a people whose creativity, resilience, and intellect produced one of the earliest known metalworking civilizations on Earth, whose art and governance systems carried wisdom far beyond their time. These were not separate sparks of greatness, they were flames from the same fire, scattered by winds of migration, yet still burning with the same ancestral light. Science may call it genetic continuity, but in truth it is the story of an unbroken family. A people who once stood shoulder to shoulder before history scattered their footprints across the continent. The genes have carried the memory where the books forgot, and when those strands of DNA matched, they spoke the same silent language that ancient traders, sailors, and priests once knew, that the continent of Africa was never a collection of fragments but a body united by its heartbeat of connection. The implications are profound. This discovery does not only challenge the arrogance of outdated scholarship, it calls every African to reimagine what identity truly means, to know that the same blood that once flowed through the veins of the Axumite builders also flows through the descendants of the Igbo smiths, is to understand that Africa's story has always been one of unity and diversity, one of shared ancestry wrapped in 1,000 tongues. It invites us to replace the false boundaries of modern politics with the deeper truth of shared origin. The DNA that links these peoples carries a lesson greater than any textbook could offer. Unity is not something to be built, it is something to be remembered. Long before lines were drawn on maps, before the concept of nations was born, there was only one rhythm of life moving across the plains, mountains, and rivers. Migration was not separation, it was expansion. Each journey added new colors to the same tapestry. And even when centuries of silence fell between them, the bond endured, waiting for science to uncover what the spirit already knew. What makes this revelation powerful is not just that it connects two groups. It restores the dignity of an entire continent's story. It tells the world that Africa was not a patchwork of isolated tribes, but a network of advanced, interlinked civilizations that shared technology, art, and spirituality long before outside influences arrived. The connection between Ethiopia and the Igbo proves that greatness was never imported, it was inherited, it was written in the blood, waiting for time to unveil it. Think of the beauty in that truth, that thousands of years ago an ancestor of today's Ethiopian may have traded with or married into the lineage of an ancestor of the Igbo. Think of the journeys, the exchanges of knowledge, the shared laughter around ancient fires. They might have parted ways as travelers, but they never ceased being family. Their descendants may have forgotten the path, but not the origin. The blood remembers. The DNA, untouched by the biases of history, carries the story forward. In a world that often glorifies division, this discovery calls for humility. It tells us that knowledge is never final, that truth is not confined to the pages of history, and that the human family is far more intertwined than we dare to admit. It is a call to celebrate what connects rather than what separates. It is a reminder that Africa's unity is not a dream for the future. It is a fact of the past waiting to be honored again. For the modern generation, this truth carries responsibility. Knowing that you share blood with those who built wonders in the East and thinkers in the West of the continent should awaken pride and purpose. It means that within you flows the legacy of builders, travelers, artists, and innovators whose reach extended far beyond their homeland. It means that the greatness you seek is already in your nature. The same courage that built Axum and the same creativity that shaped Igbo Ikwu still live within you. You are not merely their descendant, you are their continuation. The DNA that unites Ethiopia and the Igbo has done more than challenge scholars. It has exposed the smallness of thinking that sees humanity through the lens of division. It has shown that culture, language, and geography are only chapters, not boundaries. It has proven that truth cannot be buried forever. It will find a way to rise just as the sun rises again after centuries of shadow. This connection is not an end, it is a beginning, a chance to rebuild bridges that were never meant to collapse. And so this revelation stands as a monument to unity. It whispers to the world that no matter how far people travel, no matter how deeply history buries the truth, connection endures. The blood remembers, the spirit recognizes itself, and when science finally catches up to what the soul has always known, the world is reminded of a lesson older than civilization itself. We are one people, separated by time but joined by destiny. The DNA that links Ethiopia and the Igbo is not just evidence, It is poetry written in the language of life. It sings of journeys unfinished, of bonds unbroken, and of the eternal truth that unity is not something that time can destroy. It stands as proof that the past is never truly gone, that our beginnings still breathe within us, and that the light of connection will always outshine the darkness of division. When knowledge humbles pride, truth rises, because the story of a people's greatness is not written in the pages of books alone. It is engraved in the soul, carried in their breath, and whispered through the generations like a sacred rhythm that refuses to fade. True knowledge is not about facts and discoveries, it is the awakening of awareness, the light that shines when arrogance finally bows before reality. For centuries, those who wrote history believed that power could define truth, that the conqueror's word was the final story. But knowledge, when freed from the chains of ego, has a way of rewriting what pride once distorted. It humbles the loud, it uplifts the forgotten, and it restores balance to the world's memory. When truth rises, it does not shout. It illuminates, it moves quietly through the hearts of those ready to see beyond illusion. It reveals that greatness is not given by empire, not bought with conquest, but inherited through endurance, creativity, and spirit. The story of a people's greatness does not depend on how others see them, but on how deeply they have lived, how fiercely they have loved their freedom, how courageously they have shaped their destiny. When a culture's wisdom has been buried under centuries of silence, it is not lost. It waits. It sleeps beneath the surface of time, waiting for knowledge to uncover it, for the heart of humanity to be humble enough to listen again. The rise of truth is like dawn after a long night. For generations, pride, whether of nations, races, or institutions, cast shadows over reality. It built walls around knowledge, deciding whose stories mattered and whose were forgotten. But the human spirit cannot be erased. The blood remembers even when the mind forgets. The rhythm of ancestors continues to beat beneath the noise of modern life. When knowledge returns to the people it once ignored, it does not just correct the record, it heals the wound of amnesia. It teaches that wisdom was never owned by one side of the world, that genius and divinity were never confined to one civilization, and that the roots of greatness are far older and wider than the maps once allowed. Pride may build monuments, but knowledge builds bridges, and it is through those bridges that truth crosses the rivers of time. When archaeologists uncover lost artifacts, when linguists trace words across continents, when scientists decode DNA and find hidden kinship, they are not just doing research, they are listening to the echoes of the ancestors who always knew that connection could not die. They are participating in a quiet resurrection of memory, and each revelation humbles the arrogance of a world that once thought it had seen all there was to see. Greatness is not a crown or a title, it is continuity. It is the survival of values, artistry, and purpose across generations. It is the ability of a people to keep creating beauty in the face of hardship, to keep moving forward even when forgotten by others. The greatness of a people cannot be measured by how much they conquered, but by how much they endured without losing their essence. It is measured by how their songs survived slavery, how their symbols traveled across oceans, how their wisdom continued to guide hearts even when written records were erased. When knowledge humbles pride, it restores dignity to truth. It forces the world to confront what it once refused to see, that Africa was never a dark continent, but a continent of luminous minds, of thinkers, builders, navigators, and philosophers, whose contributions still pulse within the fabric of human civilization. Every discovery that connects ancient African societies to global networks, every piece of evidence that proves their sophistication, is not a surprise, it is a reminder. The truth was never gone, it was hidden behind the veil of arrogance. True education is not just learning facts, it is unlearning falsehoods. It is about removing the dust of pride that covers history's mirror. When the mirror is clear, we begin to see that humanity is one continuous river, that no culture stands alone, that every people has given something precious to the world's heritage. The Igbo, the Ethiopians, the Nubians, the Malians, the Zulu, the Egyptians, all threads in a vast fabric of human brilliance. Their stories intertwine, their symbols echo across time, their spirit remains unbroken. And when we acknowledge this, truth rises not as a weapon of superiority but as a bridge of unity. Knowledge without humility blinds, but knowledge guided by humility opens vision. When we approach history not to prove who is better, but to understand who we are, then truth becomes healing. It does not divide, it unites. It teaches us that power fades, but wisdom endures. The empire that ruled yesterday may crumble today, but the song that mothers sang to their children, the craft passed from father to son, the language of spirit and creation, those never die. They travel in memory, in DNA, in art, and in the pulse of every heartbeat that still carries the rhythm of ancient drums. The story of a people's greatness is not just found in ruins or relics. It lives in their laughter, their innovation, their endurance. It lives in the way they rebuild after loss, in the way they keep faith with themselves when the world forgets them. True greatness cannot be taken away because it is not built on power, it is built on purpose. It is carried in their blood, their memory, their language, and their unbroken rhythm of spirit. It moves silently, generation after generation, through art, song, and tradition, reminding each descendant that they are more than what the world told them they were. So when knowledge humbles pride, truth rises. It rises through the voices of those who reclaim their story, through the scholars who dare to dig deeper, through the youth who learn to see their reflection in the mirror of history with pride rather than shame. Truth rises every time a forgotten civilization is rediscovered, every time a young person learns that their ancestors were architects of wisdom, not merely subjects of empire. It rises in the realization that knowledge is not a possession, but a journey, and that every step toward understanding is a step toward liberation. And as the world learns this truth anew, let it remember greatness cannot be given or taken. It must be recognized. It is written not in crowns or monuments, but in the continuity of a people's heartbeat. It is in their stories, their art, their spirit that refuses to vanish. That is why even after centuries of distortion, truth still rises, because truth is not fragile, it is eternal. It waits for the day when pride grows quiet enough to listen. It waits for the day when knowledge finally kneels, not in defeat but in reverence to the wisdom of those who came before. And when that day comes, the world will rediscover itself and the forgotten greatness of humanity will shine once more.